Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video, and this is a big one because we got a huge update coming up in the game. I'm really excited by this. I think this might be the best update we've had in a very long time. There was an update a while back that was incredibly good with a lot of quality of life improvement stuff that I think probably outpaces this as far as like just how it is to play the game. But this one is top of the list. I mean, it's really, really good. We're getting hard mode in dungeons. We're getting live arena coming at some point. Some really nice quality of life improvements. And there's some, other stuff. We got some new art for champions and things like that. But I kind of want to cover it all really quickly for you guys, at least as quickly as I can. We're going to try and summarize basically what the video is and talk a little bit about what these things means and, just already like thinking ahead of time. What are ways that I can approach these dungeons, the live arena stuff, and, maybe, start to prep my mind for these new events. We won't really know how to best navigate this new content until we get in there and see it and can really kind of test how things are going to work. But I think this is going to be a massive, massive step in the right direction for us. So let's start off. Obviously, if you guys want to go see the video, I have that link down below, pinned comment description of the video. I highly encourage going to watch it. There's a lot of cool stuff going in here, but I'm going to cover everything. So if you don't want to watch it, you can watch this instead. That works too. So let's jump in, right? We've got 4 new dungeons, kind of. It's the same 4 dungeons we had before: Dragon, Ice Golem, Fire Knight, Spider, but we're adding a hard mode. And basically what's going to do is add another 10 levels to each dungeon. And the bosses are going to change almost completely. The mechanics are definitely going to change. They don't look very similar to what we had before, so it's not a completely new thing, but they're going to be basically those bosses, but on steroids. It's going to be pretty nuts. I'm really excited to see how this goes. The first one let's cover is Dragon. Now, Dragon's probably going to be the easiest out of all of these. Just looking at the mechanics, it seems like this is very, very doable and attainable as far as how to beat this without too much crazy stuff going on. And shouldn't change our teams too much as far as our approach goes. But we are probably going to have different approaches to these things, right? So the big thing here is that the boss is doubling down on poisons. He's placing, I think, twice as many poisons, longer duration. It's definitely going to be an issue for us. And on top of that, he's going to have an ability that's going to activate all the poisons on your team all at the same time. So that's definitely something you have to watch out for because it could possibly wipe you. He gives himself an increased attack buff as well. So being able to remove buffs or place block buffs is definitely going to be important. But I think the biggest takeaway is you're going to need a cleanser on your team. I don't know if block debuffs is going to work with those poisons. Typically, when they've been adding stuff lately with these bosses, they're landing these debuffs through whatever protection you might want to put up. So it sounds like cleansing is going to be the best option. But if you can block the debuff, that might work out really well. So champions like Duchess or Elva are going to be insanely, insanely good. Well, Elva specifically. I don't know about Duchess so much, but she can block debuffs, right? So that's always good. But it does look like this boss is going to hit really hard. So bringing in some kind of damage reduction like a Pythion might be a great option for a lot of you out there. Obviously, those are the legendary versions, but I think we should look at all these hard dungeons as legendary focused dungeons, right? We're obviously going to be able to come up with ways to do it with less rare champions to have on your account, but it's definitely designed for end game kind of content here. And so going to want to keep that in mind. That's Dragon. That's what they told us about Dragon. So not a lot new there, but I have a feeling we're going to be able to get through that pretty decently. As far as Ice Golem go, this boss, Clysis, is going to be tricky. We're going to have to come up with different strategies for this. They've definitely taken some of the old strategies had and built these champions to combat that directly. He's going to have an ability that cleanses debuffs on himself and reduces the turn meter of your team. So that's always a bit annoying, but that's something we can probably handle. The hard part is he's immune to poison. So typically that's one of the best strategies to get through Ice Golem, to use poisons so he doesn't revive the minions. That's not going to be really possible in this. One thing that is good though is HP burn is going to do more damage to this boss. I think an extra 10%. May not be significant, super significant, but that definitely gives us at least one approach to be able to take this boss down. So champions like Theodore are going to be even stronger. Champions like Ignatius or Walking Tomb Drang should be really, really good as well. So that's definitely something to kind of keep in mind. Even somebody like Dark Kale might be a really great option here for activating those HP burns. And every time an HP burn activates, it's going to drop the max HP of the minions. So that's definitely good, right? So there are some different options as far as approaches to taking this dungeon down. My guess is it's still going to be one of the harder ones to do. It's probably going to be even slower than it was before for many folks out there without some specific champions on your team. But it's kind of interesting. They, took away one option, which is poisons. They added another, which is HP burn, and made it a little bit more effective. I'm not sure how much 10% is going to be more effective, but we'll see if that's going to be a good approach to being able to beat this boss here. Then we have Fire Knight, and Fire Knight is obviously very tough. It's already really tough. Having to break down the shield to get to the boss, well, it got a lot tougher because now instead of 12 hits on stage 25 to break the shield, you're going to need 21 on stage 10 of hard mode. Now, that's a lot of hits. 21 hits is a lot of hits. So I think it's definitely going to be a challenge for people out there. On top of that, the boss is immune to turn meter reduction, which is like kind of crazy. So you're going to take a lot of time breaking down the shield. And then once you do break down the shield, you're not going to have a lot of time to attack the boss because he's immune to turn meter reduction. I'm really interested to see how this one plays out and what strategies people come up with. Now, one thing you can do is you can bring freeze to the fight. Every time you freeze the boss, it's going to reduce his turn meter by 15%. So that is potentially an option to keep the turn meter down, though I don't know how an all freeze team, how successful that could possibly be, but it is kind of interesting. So that's something we're going to want to kind of keep in mind as a possible way to go as far as approaching that boss. But yeah, that's going to be the big thing. The other problem is every time you hit a shield, it's going to reduce your max HP by 1%. So being able to heal up your max HP is definitely going to be something you're going to want to try and figure out a way to do, or you're going to have to beat this boss down fast because his big hit also will reduce your max HP by 15% of the damage you take. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. I don't know how this one's going to go, and it's probably going to be, for a lot of people, going back to the early stages of the game where beating Fire Knight was really, really hard. So it could be really interesting. I think things like counterattack, ally attack, obviously are going to be really, really good. Champions like Allure and Coldheart are not going to be nearly as effective as they were before. So that's definitely, that's definitely a change as far as how this stuff works. Then we have Spider, and Spider is, I think, really interesting. And I kind of like the changes to this mechanic because it flips some of the stuff on the head and gives you and forces you to find a different way to beat it. Basically, it's going to be the Spider is going to be immune to HP burn. The Queen is immune to HP burn and immune to turn meter reduction, which I think is really interesting. On top of that, every time an HP burn hits the Spider Queen, she actually heals up. So even though HP burn has been our main go-to strategy here, that's not going to be very effective anymore because it's just going to heal the Queen up. The flip of that is every time you kill a Spiderling, the Queen takes damage. So there's definitely some potential to being able to wipe out the waves of the Spiderlings and deal a lot of damage to the Queen that way. A lot of AoE focused damage, I think, is going to be the way to go here. The Spiderlings are just as strong as they were on stage 25, so that part didn't get any tougher. So you can kill the Spiderlings on 25, you can kill the Spiderlings in hard mode. I think it's a very interesting approach to this, and I'm actually kind of excited to see how this one plays out. I can see a lot of fun ways to go about doing this. But definitely going to take some timing as far as, using these skills and making it all work. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Now, all these dungeons, the big thing that you get from it is mythic artifacts, right? Not only did the drop rates, are those going to improve, and I would imagine it's going to be a very, very good chance of getting 6-star gear, probably only 6-star gear or really close to that on stage 10 of hard mode, and probably higher rates of getting legendary and epic artifacts. The other part is you're going to get mythic artifacts, and I think that's really cool. Mythic artifacts and accessories. So all these dungeons are going to give you that ability. Now, mythic is yet another sense of RNG, yet another pillar to climb as far as this gear goes in the game, right? We have the ascensions. Now we got mythic. It always gets harder and harder. That's just kind of the nature of games like this, I feel like. But this is going to give you the option to, once you can do this, you're going to get some very, very, very nice gear out of it. So that's kind of cool. And as always, even though the gear level is rising, what that's mostly going to affect isn't the current content that we have. It's actually going to mostly affect the content that isn't here yet and arena competitive content, right? And so we got to kind of remember that, not freak out too much that the bar keeps getting raised and raised and raised, even with Ascension. Even with, blessings, it's not like the current content got any harder. It was the same as it was before, which we were already able to beat. So kind of just kind of want to keep that in mind so people don't freak out too much about this. I would imagine there's going to be another level of Hydra added at some point, maybe even another level of Clan Boss added at some point. I would really love to see that too. But we'll have to kind of see how that all develops over time. The biggest thing though is that we can still do that content. That's not going anywhere. This is just going to be, more gear, and it's really going to affect Arena, specifically the new thing they're adding this year, Live Arena. I think this is going to be really, really cool. Obviously, we've all wanted this for a very long time, but even Raid admits in this video, it's a PvE focused game. So having a live arena thing is a bit of a challenge. I'm not sure that this is going to be the best implementation of it. I'm not as familiar as many other content creators as far as like what's the best approach necessarily for this stuff. But I know for me that I think this is going to be really cool, right? The fact that basically the way I read it, the way I watched the video, and I'll be interested to see how this goes. But basically, it's going to be like 4 periods during the day where live arena is live, and during those periods you can queue in and you can fight, and you'll get matchmaked, right? And there'll be a queue for it to make it work. And then when you go in, I think this is actually really good. They're actually introducing some cool mechanics here, some new stuff. The fight itself isn't going to be that much different, but the key is how you get there. Everybody's going to be able to select 5 champions, and you're going to pick one at a time. You and your opponent are going to pick 5 champions one at a time, and you can't bring in dupes. Once that champion's picked, they're out. And the thing is, when that happens, that each opponent gets a chance to basically veto one of the selections. So you're going to pick 5, they're going to veto one, so you're going to have 4, and then out of those 4, you choose one to be your leader, and then you jump in the fight. I think that's a very, very cool thing here. There's some other stuff too, right? I know in main arena right now, a lot of the teams, especially the defenses, are about stall defenses. One of the things here is that if the fight, there's a time limit, I think 30 minutes to complete a fight. If that time limit is exceeded, both sides lose. So it's not, you don't benefit from building a stall defense very much at all. So you really want to try and do whatever you can to actually win the fight, which I think is a nice counter to the current meta for some of the stuff in arena, where your defenses are designed mostly just to delay. And I think that'll be interesting. And of course, you're going to be fighting against somebody live. So, that you're going to be picking the skills at the same time, that kind of thing. It's very kind of a neat little thing. But the thing I'm actually most excited about, despite all that, and I think all that's very cool, this game desperately needed a live arena. The dungeons are an interesting and nice little addition to the game, even if I'm not excited to have to farm them, spend more energy, and obviously have new levels of gear. One of the things I'm actually most excited about are the quality of life improvements that are being added. I think these are massive. RSL Helper is definitely, something that a lot of people that play on computer, pretty much everybody I know, uses to help them farm gear, sort through gear, because it allows you to sell gear as you're farming it, right? So it makes it a lot easier to sort through what you have. Well, the multi-battles are going to be getting that same thing, where you're going to be able to select not only the rarity that you want, the rank that you want, but also the rarity, the substats, the set pieces. So you can really auto sell as you go through on your multi-battles, which I think is really nice and makes multi-battles a lot more helpful for us. And I think that's one of the biggest negatives with them is, you still have to go through all the gear after you do them. Now you won't have to. And I think that's absolutely fantastic and a really, really good addition to the game. And that's really great. Also, on top of that, you're going to be able to sort your gear by stats. Finally, I can find this best speed pieces by sorting my gear. I'm really excited about that. It's going to save me a lot of time playing this game. So I think that's really, really good for us in general. And so those are some of the big new changes coming out. We got some new champions coming through too. They threw up some art about all that, which I think is really cool always. But those are the main things, right? We got these hard mode dungeons, we got live arena coming, and we've got these quality of life improvements, which I'm really stoked about. So how are we going to build these freaking teams? I mean, honestly, I don't really know, right? First off, it matters how tough are the waves getting to these bosses in these dungeons. That's going to make a big difference, right? Because one of the ways to speed up your dungeon times right now is to nuke those waves down really quick. If that's not possible, it's obviously going to change our approach. Not to mention, these bosses are going to be hitting harder, and so surviving them is going to be a bit more of a challenge. We do have things like ascensions and blessings that help us survive this stuff, but still, it's not going to be an easy approach. I think that dragon is probably the easiest to deal with, right? Bringing in a cleanser is not super difficult. There's lots of them out there. And obviously, if you're doing the hard mode of these dungeons, you're going to have some semblance of champions to choose from, right? You're going to have accumulated a fair amount of options here, right? So a lot like, Sand Devil, where, having a legendary isn't like a big ask, because the high levels, you're expected to have those kind of champions on your account. I think we can say the same thing about these hard mode dungeons. And there's lots of cleansers out there that can be really good for your account. I think one of the best actually might be Elva. The fact that she can cleanse debuffs and place block debuff for 2 turns, all on a 3-turn cooldown, is a really nice bonus for us and can make that work really smoothly. I'm assuming you can block the poisons. If you can't, then that's a whole nother story. But I feel like that's going to be a easy champion to want to bring in. And then it comes down to dealing damage to these bosses. The dragon one, I think, is going to be, we might need to bring in more just traditional, like, let's just hit it really, really hard, really, really fast. I think that might be the best approach there, even going through the waves and stuff too. So I think we're going to see a lot less seer comps. I have a feeling those are going to kind of go by the wayside a little bit. Or if we do still see them, we're going to see the champions built for that a lot tankier than they used to be, right? Seer and Renegade, usually you could put them together and, build them real light and fluffy and they just die real quick. I don't know that that's going to be the case anymore. I might be wrong about that. I hope I'm wrong about that. But it might be that you have to actually build these champions to survive a little bit. In the same token, I think it's going to be a lot harder to solo farm any of this stuff, right? These bosses are obviously going to be very tough. So solo farming might not be a practical approach. Even duo farming might be a little bit extreme here. And I'm really interested to see, like, what are the resistance and accuracy levels we need? If the Iron Twins Fortress or the Sand Devil has taught us anything, is that they love to skyrocket those accuracy and resistance requirements. And that could be one of the biggest barriers to beating these hard mode dungeons, actually, is that. So it's going to be real interesting to see how that goes. I think Ice Golem is kind of a cool thing, right? The HP burn. Problem is Ice Golem takes forever, especially reviving these minions. So I have a feeling that bringing in block revive champions is going to be really, really valuable. Champions like Zavia might be extremely helpful, especially considering that, there's no poisons on the boss. So you don't have to worry about activating the boss's damage, right? And having him crack your entire team. That might be still the best approach, by poisoning the minions and still nuking them down, and then just relying on HP burn or raw damage to take down the boss itself. But being able to block revive, I feel like, is going to be really, really valuable, more so than it was in the earlier stages. So that's definitely something I'm interested to see how that plays out. Fire Knight looks incredibly hard. I don't know how you beat down 21 shield levels. That's a lot. Obviously, blessings are going to play a big part in that, right? Things like Phantom Touch can do a lot for knocking that shield down. Maybe Rhonda might actually be a go-to kind of champion for this. But bringing in ally attack is definitely going to be a valuable approach. I think bringing in counterattack might be one of the best approaches. If you can knock the shield down before you even have to take a turn, or at least mostly knock it down, that gives you a lot more turn meter to actually deal damage to the boss itself. And I think that could be really, really valuable. I still don't think, erasing max HP lost is going to be the approach for people. I still think you're going to just want to try and nuke down the boss before he can kill you. And that's probably what people are going to lean with most. But champions like Martyr and Valkyrie, maybe even Skullcrusher, are probably going to be more valuable than they've ever been before. I'm interested about the freeze thing. I think that could be an interesting alternative way to go about doing this. I don't think we have enough freeze champions that make that really viable. And I'm also interested about champions that do multi-hits and can place freeze on those multi-hits, and see if those multi-hits will actually affect the boss. I think that would be interesting, because if I can do a triple hit with like some freeze attached to it, will it reduce the turn meter every time that happens, or just once? I think that's going to be a real interesting thing to see, because if it can work on multi-hits, then all of a sudden I feel like we might be seeing a variety of champions that we wouldn't normally use be used against that boss, and that could be really cool. The Spiderling thing is cool. I think that's very cool. The spider boss, nuking the Spiderlings does damage to the boss, and if you watch the video, you can see it does significant amount of damage. It's not just a small bit. So I think that actually could be really, really cool and a fun, different way to approach the Spider Queen. And we might actually be running slower teams than you might expect, letting all the Spiderlings build, destroying them all at once, and then letting them all build again to destroy them again. That might be an interesting approach to it. I'm really interested about that. That one has me the most intrigued, and so I'm excited about that. That part gets me really excited. And the live arena is cool. I love the idea of having 5 champions that can do this, right? I think that's a really, really cool thing. And being able to veto one of the options from the enemy. So I feel like when we go into these fights, we're going to want to have. Now, I know they said you can't have dupes. I don't know that when you pick a champion that the other person can't pick that champion. I think that's the case. And if so, that means we're going to need to prepare at least 10 champions when we go into a fight, right? At least 10. And I think that makes it very interesting. And I also think because each champion really affects the build and the approach of your team. And I think that could be really intriguing, right? As soon as somebody picks Rhodos, then you bring in Ultimate Death Knight, right? As soon as somebody brings in, Duchess, now you're bringing in a perfect counter for that, maybe like an Astrolon or a Countess Lix. I think there's going to be some real interesting approaches to this that could be really fun. This is the type of thing I wish they had done with 3v3 and made that more interesting as well. But that is not what they did, and that's frustrating. They still need to fix that. So there's still some things in this game where they can make improvements that I think would be really good. But this live arena thing is massive for the game as a whole and will bring a lot more life to the content as well. Like we've needed this for a very, very long time. It gives more longevity to the game and makes things like arena much more interesting and enjoyable for players to approach, right? The normal classic arena gets pretty stagnant pretty quickly. Having live arena is going to be a lot of fun. I am a little nervous about the 4 set times for live arena. I mean, in a 24-hour day, like when are those going to happen? Is that every 6-hour segment? Can I get a full 8 hours of sleep at night? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how they approach that, how they implement that. And I'm really curious about it, but it has me very excited. I'd be very, very excited because I think that's going to bring a lot more fun to the end game player. And I think it's going to bring a lot of fun to mid game players as well. I think early on, it's obviously going to be hard. My free to play is not going to love it, right? I'm probably not going to like that at all. But for everything else, I think it should be really, really exciting. I should have a lot of fun with it. So I don't know about you guys, but I think this is one of the best updates we've had in a long time. I'm really excited to see the details of it, to test all this stuff out, and to see when these happen. Live arena, I know is not coming for a while. It's supposed to be some point this year. So it might be in 3 months, might be in 6 months, might be in 2 weeks, but I highly doubt that. I think that's going to need a lot of testing, a lot of playtime. They're going to need to update their servers and make sure that's all stable for that, because every time it goes live, there's going to be a huge influx of players actually playing the game. And so they're going to need to adjust all that stuff for that. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see. I imagine we're going to come up with a lot of issues along the way that we're going to just have to adjust with, go with, and figure out as we play. But I love the potential of this. I think it is really, really cool update, and I know a lot of people are really excited about this. So let me know what you guys think about this down below. I'm real interested to hear what you think. If you have ideas already about approaches to these bosses, like, maybe you're going to bring in Sissia for Ice Golem, I think that would be a pretty good way to do it. Or, whatever it is, whether it's the dungeons or the arena, are there strategies that you're already thinking of as far as how to, do the live arena? Because I think there's definitely some mind game stuff that you can play there, which is really interesting, right? I have to bring in 2 nukers in case they negate one of them, or do I bring in 2 protection champions in case they negate one of them? There's so many ways to go about this. I feel like that's going to be a lot of mind games that we're going to be able to play with that, which should be pretty fun. So anyway, guys, thanks. Let me know down below what you guys think. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.